Hi everyone! So as always, if you just simply want to skip to the recap, you can skip to this timestamp down below. I will also put it in the description. I do not know why I've only recently had this idea to make it easier on some of y'all, but I will also put it in the description. If you read the title of today's video, then you know I'm going to be recapping my favorite 11th Doctor episode or episodes of Doctor Who. And when I tell you this one was the absolute hardest for me, I genuinely mean that. The 11th Doctor is my doctor, right? I love 10th, I love 9th, but the 11th Doctor is my doctor. Having to choose one episode slash storyline to be like, if I could only ever watch one for the rest of my life, this is the one I would choose, was so hard for me, to the point where I procrastinated. I rewatched a bunch of episodes and I was still just kind of stumped because there's so many one-offs that I love, but there's also so many like two-parters in Doctor Who as well, and I just genuinely was having like a very very hard time choosing because I will go back and watch especially the 11th Doctor over and over again and never get tired of it. Like, I don't know if you noticed my shirt today, but I got this shirt back in like 2013 when I was in middle school. If you look closely, it's only updated to the 11th Doctor because at the time that I got this shirt, the 11th Doctor was still the Doctor, which is why I also wore it. But like, it was hard. First, I was stuck on three different ones. The one that I ended up choosing, and also Flesh and Stone and Time of the Angels. That's the one I was also stuck on. And I believe the Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon. It's something like that. It's season 6, episode 1 and 2. Those two plus the one that I did end up choosing were the three that I was stuck on. And it was to the point where I kind of rewatched them. And I was still stuck until I was faced with having to write my notes, which I also upgraded my notes. I literally have a college level notebook now. When it came to like having to rewatch episodes to write my notes, I was like, I've just watched all these episodes, but I do not feel like rewatching this one right now. But I would love to rewatch this one. And that is what made me end up choosing the episode that I did for my recap. But yeah, as for my rules and parameters, when it comes to deciding, I decide based off of storylines. And so again, this one ended up also being a two-parter. So, without further ado, I will tell you the episodes I ended up choosing. And the ones I ended up choosing were season 5, episode 12, The Pandorica Opens, and season 5, episode 13, The Big Bang. Now, of course, this is your spoiler warning. I'll be going in great detail into my recap, telling you practically all that happens in these episodes. So, if you want to go and watch the show and come back and watch this, or if you want to watch this to give you a review of what happens in these episodes, feel free to. I'm just letting you know now that if you haven't seen it, I'm about to spoil the entirety of these two episodes for you. So, spoiler warning. Now, let's get into it. So again, our first episode is season 5, episode 12, The Pandorica Opens. Our episode actually starts in France in 1890. We kind of get these view of two people. One of them is not, the man is not specifically named, but the woman is named Madame Vernay, and they're both taking care of Vincent Van. We say Gogh here, but I don't know if it's Goff. I'm going to just say Go. They are taking care of Vincent Van Gogh as he is like completely, not mentally well. He is throwing a fit. And they kind of stop taking care of him for a second and stare at this painting that we as the audience do not get to see on screen. And they're quite confused by the painting. And then we get another jump. Our jump takes us to the Cabinet War Rooms in London in 1941, where Professor Edwin Bracewell, who I would just call Professor Bracewell, he shows Winston Churchill this painting, the same exact painting that our two characters before were looking at in France. Winston Churchill, I should say, is confused by this painting, but Professor Bracewell said it's not necessarily your job to be able to understand the painting, it is for you to pass along. So that is exactly what Winston Churchill does. He makes a call, and we are then transported to Stormcage, which is basically, it's called a containment facility. It is a prison, and this is happening now in 51 15:45, and the guard outside of the cell of River Song picks up the phone and River takes the call. Now, Winston wasn't trying to phone River, but River's the one who ended up picking the call, and the reason that she says this happened is because he called the time vortex and the TARDIS rerouted the call to River's cell, probably because the TARDIS knew that River would be able to get the message to the Doctor, who Winston was trying to phone in the first place. But after River gets the message from Winston, she breaks out of Storm Cage using her iconic hallucinogenic lip gloss. And then we get another cut to what is called the Royal Collection, and this also takes place in 1545. In this basically museum, we see River steal a painting, and she runs into the Queen, the guard-ish of the Royal Collection, and she wants to know as to why River is trying to steal this painting. And the minute that the Queen sees this painting that River is stealing, the look on her face is just like utter sadness. And at this point, again, we as the audience still have not seen the painting, so imagine me like an 11-year-old watching this for the first time, and I'm like, what is on this painting? And I don't know if you've noticed, but we've basically just been getting a cut to different characters we've seen throughout season 5, because this are the 2 season finale episodes of this season of Doctor Who, which I love a good tie up. I love when characters come back and we get to see people outside of their episodes in different episodes. Because this was the first season of Doctor Who I actually ever watched, for me it kind of just like started to tie the world together, so I think that kind of like adds to my love for it. But our second to last cut is to the Maldivarium. I'll put it on screen. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. The Maldivarium, still in 5145. Our only takeaway from this scene, the only reason I mention it is because River ends up getting a vortex manipulator, which is basically like a thing you can put on your wrist and you can time travel with it. The Doctor always describes it as being cheap and nasty time travel. Another thing we get a hint at in this scene is that the guy who is selling it to River Song tells her that the device was freshly taken off the wrist of a handsome time agent, which I feel like this is hinting at it was stolen from our one and only Jack Harkness, because in the Doctor Who universe, that is in the show Doctor Who, he is the only person at this point I remember that we've ever seen have a vortex manipulator. In Torchwood, there's another person who has a vortex manipulator, but in Doctor Who, Jack is the only character we've really seen with a vortex manipulator at this point. And obviously I think this taking off the arm of a handsome time agent, Jack was a time agent, handsome, taking off his wrist, context clues, so I think they cut it off Jack's wrist. But finally, we get our last cut to Amy and the Doctor in the TARDIS. The Doctor is basically telling Amy that he has just landed the TARDIS on Planet 1, the oldest planet in the universe, because there is this cliff face that has this message on it that has never been translated. It is the oldest message in the universe, and so because when you get into the TARDIS is able to translate anything, he wanted to show it to Amy. And so when they open the doors of the TARDIS and the TARDIS translates the message that is on this cliff face, it simply reads, "Hello, sweetie." And right under this big message, it has coordinates that the Doctor ends up following. And those coordinates end up taking him and Amy to Britain, right in the middle of one of the Roman legions. So I believe the time period, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I just remember a different character in the story saying this later on, but it was about like 280, but I could be completely wrong, and if I am wrong, just know this is a long, long time ago. The minute that they land and they see that like right in front of them are these Roman camps, Amy mentions that Romans and learning about the Romans was one of her favorite subjects in school. And then before the Doctor can even say anything about this comment that she just made, a Roman soldier comes up to them, mistaking the Doctor to be Caesar, and tells them that Cleopatra is ready to see them. Of course, the Doctor knows that Cleopatra is not in the middle of a Roman legion, so he goes and follows this Roman soldier to find out who is actually posing as Cleopatra. And lo and behold, when they get to the tent, they see River Song dressed up as Cleopatra with 2 men waiting on her hand and feet. River is such a baddie and it's so funny. Moving on. The doctor scolds her for defacing one of the oldest cliff faces in the universe, but the simple reason she says she did it is because he wasn't answering his phone, and he was wondering why she needed to deliver a message to him so bad, and she basically says that she needed him to see this painting. And so that's exactly what she does. She shows him the painting that all these different characters were trying to get to the doctor. The painting itself is called the Pandorica Opens. And upon hearing this, the doctor kind of like scoffs because to him and to the entire existence of the universe, he basically says that the Pandorica is a fictional story. It is a fictional box. It doesn't exist. And well, of course, Amy doesn't know what the Pandorica is. And so River basically says, and I quote, "The Pandorica was built to contain the most feared thing in all the universe." Also, because it's off frame, I just want you to let you know I have exploding TARDIS pillows that I made back when I was in middle school right here next to me. So I'm committed. It's a lifestyle at this point. But anyways, even though the doctor believes that the Pandorica is a fairy tale, he still decides to go out and look for it. And the one thing he says is that if you have a box that is meant to contain one of the evilest things in the universe, you'd want to remember where you put it. And so that leads the doctor, Amy, and River to take a horse ride over to Stonehenge. After a bit of poking around, they end up finding the secret entrance to underground under Stonehenge, where when they open these big doors, they see the box, the Pandorica, right in front of them. I should also mention that as the doctor was walking into this room, he kind of like accidentally kicked something, and when he looks down, that thing he kicked was a detached Cyberman arm, which is going to become more relevant later. But as he is inspecting the box, he is also telling Amy the story of the Pandorica. And he basically says, and I quote, because I want you to hear this story from his words, not mine, because the dialogue in Doctor Who for me has always been just so I'm going to be quoting quite a few things because also I just don't want to get it wrong. There's some parts where I'm like, I want to be specific. I don't want to summarize. I want y'all to hear it. So the doctor explains the Pandorica as being the lore of the Pandorica being, and I quote, "There was a goblin or a trickster or a warrior, a nameless terrible thing soaked in the blood of a billion galaxies, the most feared being in all of the cosmos, and nothing could stop it or hold it or even reason with it. One day it would just drop out of the sky and tear down your world." Then Amy asks, if that's the case, how did it end up in the box? And the doctor simply says, "A good wizard tricked it." And after hearing this story, Amy finds it funny because the story and the lore of the Pandorica kind of sounds like one of her favorite childhood stories, which is Pandora's Box. And it was this box that was meant to just hold evils in the world. And after she says this, the doctor comes to her and is kind of like a bit confused because there's two coincidences that have happened. She loved Romans as a child and she loved Pandora's Box. But before he can explore or even dig into these coincidences any further, River tells the doctor that the Pandorica is actively opening as they are down here, as they are speaking. It is being opened from the inside. Whatever is inside the Pandorica is opening it and is coming out. The doctor also scans around the room and realizes that the stones in Stonehenge are transmitting a message all over space and time. So any and everyone in the universe can hear this message that is being broadcast. That message being that the Pandorica is opening. So River decides to scan to see if there are any starships around the planet, and she says at minimum there are 10,000 starships around planet Earth. There are probably billions, but she says, it's too many to even completely register on her device. And then she names off a bunch of different aliens, which I'm going to have to directly read these names off this paper because they are definitely, some of these alien names are a mouthful. But here are some of the names that she names as the starships being Daleks, Cybermen, Centaurans, Terrapatil, Slitheen, Chelonian, Nestine, Draven, Sycorax, Hamagoth, Zygon, and Draconian. Like, there are a lot of different alien races and species just up watching, coming to see the Pandorica open. And after this, they all decide to go outside, to go above ground, and when they look around, you can just see all these starships zooming right above the Earth, right above Stonehenge. And River at this point honestly begs the doctor to run, just like for the first time in his life, run for his life, because there are so many different alien species up there that hate him, that just absolutely hate his guts. But the doctor, being the doctor, he does not run. He instead gets the idea to enlist some Roman soldiers to help him. So he sends River back to gather these soldiers, and the minute that she enters the camp, she is kind of escorted to what I will just call the main tent. And the leader, the actual general, I don't know ranks in military, I'm sorry, but the actual general of the Roman legion is back, and we get this short scene where River basically tells him that, this is not what you're used to. This is not a normal battle. These are not the enemies that you're used to conquering, and if you want to survive this, you're going to need my help. You're going to need the help of the doctor, and he needs some soldiers. So she's able to get 51 volunteers to help the doctor. But then we get a cut back to downstairs under Stonehenge, and the doctor is kind of inspecting the Pandorica when Amy brings up a ring she found. Now, for a bit of background information, because if it's been a while for you, this isn't going to make sense unless I say this background information. An episode or two before this episode, Amy lost her fiance Rory. He basically got pew-pewed and then taken into a crack in time, and when the light from that crack in time touched him, it basically erased his existence from time. Like, he was never even born, and therefore she does not remember him. And so back to the episode again, she finds this ring and she asks the doctor about it. And in this little exchange, the doctor is kind of trying to usher her to remember Rory, because there is a possibility that she can. And if she can remember him, that's not necessarily going to bring him back, but it is going to bring back all those memories that she has with this man she loved. But before, she can even kind of dive into that, she basically just gives the doctor the ring back and kind of changes the subject. This is also when the doctor brings up as to why he decided, or why he chose to bring Amy along to travel with him. This does come up again in the next episode, but this is the first time he kind of like mentions it. And he starts to kind of hint at the fact that her house is very, very big, and that her life doesn't really make sense. Like, her upbringing doesn't really make sense. But before he can even really get into that subject, they are interrupted again. That's another thing I like about Doctor Who, is that like it's kind of like one thing right after the other. It's one thing I love about action, but stuff like that, this is a side note by the way, reminds me of how it is a kids show. And the reason I say that is because a few years ago I decided to rewatch Aladdin, and one thing I noticed now, or now watching it as an adult, even though it was a few years ago, I was an adult a few years ago, versus when I watched it as a kid, is that how fast it is. Like, there truly aren't, if you go and rewatch the Disney movies, you will notice there aren't a lot of breaks in the action. It is one thing right after the other, and that is because they expect kids to have like a short attention span. So when they have little breaks, those little breaks are not that long, and then right afterwards the action picks back up, and that's what Doctor Who does as well. So if it feels like I'm just kind of being like, and they're interrupted by this and then they're interrupted by that, that's literally how the episode goes. Everything is, it's just like boom 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 boom, everything is happening. But anyways, getting back into the episode, they are interrupted by something shooting at them, and when the doctor gets a look at what it is that Cyberman arm that he ended up running into earlier. The doctor suspects that the Cyberman arm and other pieces of the Cyberman are looking for new organic material, because the organic material that is inside the Cyberman is old, decrepit, and decayed. And if you don't know what that means, the human being that was inside the Cyberman is deceased and, again, old, decrepit, and decayed, and it needs a new human being, new organic matter, and so it is looking for a new host, and it wants it to be either Amy or the doctor. So Amy plays distraction, and the doctor grabs the Cyberman arm and is about to deactivate it, and right as he is dealing with it and Amy is kind of standing off to the side, she ends up getting grabbed by the Cyberman head, and before the doctor can even help her, he gets electrocuted by the Cyberman arm and passes out. The Cyberman head actually shoots a dart into Amy's neck. It's a sedative dart, and after this, the head rejoins the rest of the body. And at the end of this scene, what ends up saving Amy is one of the Roman soldiers basically stabbing the Cyberman head and effectively killing it. But before Amy can truly thank her savior, she passes out from the sedative that was just darted into her neck. Once Amy's savior sets her down, basically basically on this table, we get a closer look at him and we realize that it is Rory. It is her fiance who was the one that saved her. The man that was basically deleted and erased and who was never born ever in the universe, right here in like 280 as a Roman soldier. Shortly after this, the doctor ends up waking up. He checks on Amy, says she is fine, and him and Rory have this like funny little exchange because, you know, the doctor is like, yeah, you're not supposed to exist. How are you here? And Rory isn't really able to give him an answer as to why he is here either. In this little exchange the doctor and Rory are having is interrupted by the Pandorica itself because it is on its last phase. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that River mentioned that the Pandorica has like thousands of locks on the inside. And so when I say the last phase the Pandorica is opening, I mean the last few locks that are on the Pandorica are unlocking from the inside. And so the doctor asks River to bring the TARDIS around so that he can get some tools he needs from the TARDIS. So at this point, remember, River is in the TARDIS, the doctor and Amy are downstairs, and so is Rory. And well, if you remember, there are thousands and millions of starships that are upstairs waiting for the Pandorica to open, and so the doctor decides to go upstairs and gives my absolute all-time favorite monologue of Doctor Who. I love this monologue that Matt Smith gives in this moment. If you have not seen it, I recommend you go and see it. As an actor myself, I love how he delivers it and how much passion he puts into it. Like, I can't help but smile every single time I hear this monologue. It might not be that amazing to everyone else, but genuinely, it's one of my all-time favorite monologues that I've ever read and heard. So again, I recommend you go and watch this. But this monologue basically scares off the starships. I put that in air quotes because the doctor says that giving that speech and scaring off the starships as they like fly away from the planet really only gave him about maybe half an hour of time, a little bit more time than he would have had to kind of figure out who and what is happening with the Pandorica. Because right after this speech and after the starships leave, he goes back downstairs and gets back to work. But as he is back downstairs, Amy wakes up and the doctor makes sure she's okay, and then Amy runs into Rory. And from Amy's interaction with Rory, he realizes that she does not remember him. And this is actually when the doctor explains to him as to why she doesn't. And of course, he reiterates everything that I've said prior about like him being erased from Earth, but he also says, and I quote, "There are cracks in time. There's going to be a huge explosion in the future on one particular day, and every other moment in history is cracking around it." And then Rory kind of like asks what exploded, what caused the cracks. And then we get kind of like this montage of the doctor piecing together what actually caused the cracks. And of course, because he's smart, he pieces together what ended up causing the cracks was the TARDIS exploding on June 26, 2010. He doesn't say this to Rory, but he kind of just, again, pieces this together in his brain. That is what causes the cracks. So he's got that out of the way, but even with that, the doctor still can't really put his mind around what made Rory end up as a Roman soldier, and so he chalks it up as being a miracle. And he encourages Rory to go after Amy and just, you know, that's your girl, so go be her man. I'm going to warn you, we're getting to the end of the episode, so there are going to be a lot of cuts, and then I kind of like summarize the end, so I'm just warning you now. We're going to get a lot of back and forth between different characters at different places, because remember, the doctor is downstairs under Stonehenge, Amy and Rory are now upstairs, and River is in the TARDIS. So these are where all our cuts are going to be going. So first we get a cut to River in the TARDIS, and her ride in the TARDIS is very bumpy. She was simply trying to transport the TARDIS to the doctor downstairs, but the TARDIS actually ends up taking her to Legworth on June 26, 2010. Upon stepping outside, she realizes that something else has been to the house in front of her because she sees scorch marks in the grass, and when she walks upstairs to the bedroom, she realizes that she is in Amy's family home. And in the bedroom, she discovers a book about Romans, and it's not just like a normal book. The Romans that she sees depicted on the front and inside the books are the actual Romans that make up the Legion where the doctor is, like photocopies. She also discovers a second book, and that book being The Pandorica Opens. And then we get a cut to Amy and Rory. During their conversation, Amy still doesn't necessarily remember Rory, but she starts to cry, and she can't really put a finger on it, but she realizes that she is crying tears of joy for just some odd reason. And this kind of prompts Rory to try to, like, get her to remember him. Then we get a cut back to River calling the doctor on the phone in the TARDIS, basically telling him that all the Romans are fake. They're literally depicted in the children's book. So is the Pandorica. Like, all of it is fake. All of it is a trap. And during the conversation that River is having with the doctor, the TARDIS starts to go haywire, and River is no longer in control of the TARDIS. The TARDIS is basically flying itself. Then we get a cut back to Amy and Rory, and their conversation, their little reunion, gets interrupted by this high-pitched ringing. And the minute this ringing is heard, all the Roman soldiers basically just like power down. Like, everyone stops, and then they reactivate again, and Rory is the only one of these Roman soldiers who is actually fighting the activation. He's standing there in front of Amy, just really trying to remind himself that he is Rory. Then we get a cut to the doctor, and he is still on the phone with River, trying to help her gain control of the TARDIS again. And because at this point in the episode I got tired of writing each like cut back to each character, I put them in their own little bubbles. So just know all these scenes that I'm about to say are intertwining with each other, and this is like the end of the episode-ish. So first, starting with River in the TARDIS. River is trying to land the TARDIS so that she can leave. She gave the doctor the information that, the TARDIS is in June 26, 2010, and upon hearing this, the doctor is like, you need to get out of there. I don't care where you go to a different time zone, go somewhere else, but do not land the TARDIS in June 26, 2010. And so she finally does end up landing the TARDIS, but when she tries to go for the doors do not open. She's still on the phone with the doctor, and so she's pleading with him to help her, but at this point he cannot help her because he's being kind of held captive at this point by the Roman soldiers, which I'll get more into when I summarize the doctor's part. But at this point, again, he's not able to help her. In a last-ditch effort to save herself, River takes jumper cables, attaches them to the door, and tries to jumpstart the TARDIS doors to opening. By doing this, she finally does get the doors to open, but when she opens the doors, it is just a wall. She is unable to leave. And so, as the TARDIS is exploding, her last words are, "I'm sorry, my love." Now, summarizing Amy and Rory, Rory continues to fight the activation, again basically reminding himself of who he actually is, and this is when Amy remembers who he is, and she tries to help him, trying to tell him, you're Rory Williams, we grew up together, we're both from Legworth, like, just all these things. One of the things she also references to try to get him to remember who he is the ring. The doctor gave Rory the ring when he told him to go upstairs and go after Amy, and so Amy gets Rory to show her the ring, and not long after showing her the ring, Rory activates, and he accidentally shoots Amy in the stomach, and she dies in his arms. Lastly, I will summarize the doctor. Like I mentioned when I was talking about River, the doctor gets grabbed by these Roman soldiers and escorted into a different room downstairs under Stonehenge. In almost kind of like a fit of anger, he basically explains to the Roman soldiers what they are. He basically tells the Romans that they are plastic Romans. They are duplicates of real Romans, and they are driven by the nesting consciousness. The Romans eventually do stop and report to their leaders that the Pandorica is ready. This confuses the doctor because he's like, what do you mean the Pandorica is ready? Isn't there something like already in the Pandorica? But the leaders respond to the Roman soldiers, and upon hearing the voice that responds to the soldiers, because I should say the Roman soldiers are kind of holding the doctor like this from the front, so his back is to the leaders that the Roman soldiers are reporting to. And upon hearing the voice, he freezes because the voice that responds to the soldiers is a Dalek's voice. And so this prompts the doctor to turn around, and when he turns around, he sees all these different alien races and species just in front of him together. And I should say the main ones that end up talking to him are the Centaurans, the Cybermen, and the Daleks. And they basically explain to the doctor that they scanned him. They scanned all his dimensions. They know his sizes, his capacities, what him as a Time Lord can take, and like all that stuff. And they did all of that so that they could create the perfect prison for the doctor. And that prison was the Pandorica. They also tell him that they used his companion's memories to basically create the perfect trap that he would not ignore to get him to come there. And then they tell the soldiers to put the doctor in the Pandorica, and he tries to fight, but the doctor eventually does get strapped into the Pandorica in a way where he's not able to escape, and he's confused as to why all these different alien races that normally would be fighting each other are working together. And they explain to him that they believe that he causes the end of the universe. And the doctor tries to explain that it is the TARDIS that causes the end of the universe, not him, but the aliens tell him that the doctor is the only one who can fly the TARDIS, which we know is not true because River can fly the TARDIS. But they don't really listen to him because as the doors are shutting, the doctor is like pleading with them to let him save the universe. And he is yelling as the doors completely seal and shut on him. And our episode ends with a view of the Earth as we see all the stars around the Earth going out. Now let's go into the next episode, which is episode 5, season 13. The Big Bang. Our episode starts 1,894 years in the future from the point that our last episode ended. We are at Amy's house when she was 7, so it is about 1996 at this point, and she's doing the same exact prayer that we heard her do in season 1, episode 1, the 11th hour, where she's basically praying for someone to come and inspect the crack in her wall. And if you kind of listen to the prayer she gives at the beginning of the 11th hour and this prayer, you will definitely for sure notice some differences. But the main difference you notice is that in the 11th hour, the first episode of season 5, is that her prayer gets interrupted by the doctor's TARDIS crashing into a shed in, I believe, her front yard or her backyard, and she goes out to inspect it. But in this episode, her prayer gets interrupted because she believes she hears something at the window, but when she looks out her window, she sees nothing. The doctor is not there. Then we get a cut to Amy, her Aunt Sharon, and a woman named Christine in an office. I'm guessing Christine is like her therapist because of the way she like talks and interacts with Amy. But Christine is looking at this painting that Amy has painted, and she points to the painting and asks Amy, what are these things in the painting? And Amy says stars. And the minute that she says stars, her Aunt Sharon has this like frustrated reaction. And instead of getting frustrated with Amy, Christine actually is like, you know what, let's just take a trip outside. And so we go outside. Aunt Sharon, Amy, and Christine go outside. And as they're looking up in the sky, Christine asks Amy to tell her what she sees. And she says she sees the moon. And she says, do you see anything else? And Amy says no. And when we get a view of the sky, there are no stars in the sky. Could you imagine looking outside and not seeing stars in the sky? I would absolutely hate that because I love looking out in the sky. And like from my house, when I look up in the sky, I can see like the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper. Sometimes I can see the Capricorn star constellation if I look close enough. And then I can see like Orion's belt. So I love stars, so I couldn't imagine looking up and not being able to see any stars in the sky. I think it'd be quite unnerving. But then we get a cut to later that night, and Amy ends up sneaking downstairs, and as she's like midway on the stairs, she sees someone at the front door, and the person at the front door slips something through, I believe it's called like a letterbox. No, you know, the little slit in the door they can like slip mail through. Someone slips something through there. And Amy goes to inspect it, and it ends up being a brochure for the National Museum. And in this brochure, the Pandorica is circled in kind of like a red Sharpie. And at the back of the brochure, it says, "Come along, pond." Side note, from this point on, I will be calling 7-year-old Amy Amelia just to avoid confusion later on in the episode. So again, 7-year-old Amy is going to be referred to as Amelia, and adult Amy is going to be Amy. So back to the recap. The next day after receiving this brochure, Amelia gets her Aunt Sharon to take her to the National Museum, and right away when she's in the museum, she basically is pulling her Aunt Sharon to the Pandorica, and when her aunt is moving too slow, she lets go of her hand and she goes to the Pandorica by herself. And she's standing in front of the Pandorica, basically looking at it, when someone steals her drink. And so she's looking around for the person who snatched her drink, and she is unable to find him. And when she looks back at the Pandorica, there's a note on it, and the note reads, "Stick around, pond." And so Amelia ends up hiding in the museum until the museum is closed. And once she knows that the coast is clear, she goes back back up to the Pandorica, and this time she actually touches it. And immediately after touching it, the Pandorica activates. And when it opens, we see an adult Amy inside. And then straight away after this, we get a cut 1,894 years in the past, and we see Rory sitting on the ground with Amy's body in his lap. And as he's kind of just sitting there mourning his fiance and talking to her, the doctor appears. And he tells Rory, yes, Amy is dead, but she's not completely dead, and also that he needs to get him out of the Pandorica. And so the doctor hands Rory his screwdriver, and then he disappears again. Rory listens to the doctor, and so he goes downstairs, uses his sonic screwdriver to open the Pandorica, and when it opens, surprise, surprise, the doctor is in the Pandorica. And of course, the doctor is completely confused as to one, how Rory was able to open the Pandorica, and two, why he has his sonic screwdriver. But he also gets distracted by what he sees around the room. And when the camera pans out, we basically see all these, what you could call fossils of these aliens that were there when the doctor was sealed in the Pandorica. The doctor basically explains that these fossils are snapshots of what the universe basically used to be, and the universe is now experiencing a total event collapse. He says the universe literally never happened. So all those aliens never even existed. And so if that's the case, Rory kind of points out, like, how are they alive? And the doctor said it's simply because they are in the eye of the storm. Then they go upstairs to check on Amy, and we get this kind of funny scene. I mean, it's not funny to Rory, obviously, because the doctor is basically like, your girlfriend is not as important as the universe, and that obviously prompts Rory to punch him. But the reason I say this scene is funny is because, like, how he was able to fool Rory. Like, of course the doctor cares about Amy. The only reason he's dealing with you is because he likes traveling with Amy, right? Like, the only reason you got in this club is because of her. The doctor basically hints that he did this to check to see if Rory was Rory and he wasn't under the control of, like, the Nestine consciousness. And Rory passes the test, and so the doctor takes Amy downstairs and puts her in the Pandorica. So when they get downstairs, he basically explains to Rory as to why he is able to exist. If you remember in the last episode, which was not that long ago, the doctor explains to the Roman soldiers that they were created by the Nestine consciousness, but they were also created because of Amy. All the alien races that created this scenario to trap the doctor took a snapshot of Amy's consciousness. And when they did that, they not only got a snapshot of what Amy grew up with, but within this snapshot they took of Amy's brain, they also were able to duplicate Rory's heart, mind, and soul. Basically make another version of him. Which, this to me, like, if you really break it down, the real Rory, like the flesh and blood and bone Rory, is still dead. Like, he died under the earth when he was first taken. This is him. Like, yes, it's his consciousness and everything, but it is still technically a copy of the original Rory. Like, it's not the original Rory. And so for the rest of Doctor Who, for the rest of Amy's life, she is living with and married to the copy of her fiance, not the original, just the copy that was made of him. Because one thing the doctor highlights later in the episode is that while Rory is not indestructible, he is made of plastic. I couldn't imagine dating a copy. Moving on. The doctor explains to Rory that while Amy is mostly dead, she is not completely dead. And one thing that the Pandorica does is stasis lock you, which basically means that it forces you to stay alive. And so the Pandorica can also heal her. And all it needs to heal her is a scan of her living DNA. And Rory kind of asks, like, when is it going to get that? And the doctor says, well, it practically will get it in 2,000 years. And so he takes River's vortex manipulator out of this bag, puts it on his arm, and extends his arm out to Rory so that they can teleport to 2,000 years in the future. But Rory basically refuses, and it's like, I'm not leaving her in this box unguarded. The doctor's like, well, I mean, she won't remember it. She won't feel it. And Rory tells the doctor, tell me, will she be safer if I stay here or if I go with you? And of course, the doctor's like, she will be safer if you stay here. So Rory makes the decision to stay behind, and for the next 2,000 years guard the Pandorica, which I mean, all I'm gonna say is if he wanted to, he would. We get a cut to present day Amy and Amelia. Amy is kind of getting her bearings and she sees this kind of documentary, or you know how like at museums they'll have little things that explain the different exhibits. This was a Pandorica exhibit being explained on a TV, and on the TV, the gist of it is it basically says there was this lone centurion. I'm going to just say lone Roman soldier. There was this lone Roman soldier who guarded the Pandorica for thousands of years, and the Roman soldier never let anyone get too close to the Pandorica. And the last known sighting of the Roman soldier was in 1941 when the warehouse the Pandorica was being held in was bombed during, what is that, 1941? World War II. Yeah, because the other one was in the 20s. And as Amy and Amelia are watching this, they get interrupted by a Dalek coming after them. And the minute that the Dalek starts coming after them, the doctor appears, because he was transported by the vortex manipulator. The doctor goes to guard Amy and Amelia, and right at that minute, the security guard of the museum shows up and shoots the Dalek through the eye stalk. And when we get a closer look at this security guard for the museum, it ends up being Rory. Amy and Rory finally reunite. He tells her sorry. She's like, I've gotten over it. And as Amy and Rory are practically having a mini makeout session, the doctor is confused as to why the Dalek exists, right? If everything from the previous universe never existed, how can a Dalek exist? And he works out that the light from the Pandorica partially restored the Dalek. And then the Dalek starts to reboot up again, and this prompts our gang to run. They run into this little area. It's the room the Pandorica is being held in, and the doctor goes to shut the doors with a fez on his head and a mop in his hand, and Rory kind of stops him and is like, that's how you showed up to me all those years ago when you told me to get you out of the Pandorica. And so this kind of prompts like a little back and forth that I will summarize, because this is one of my like favorite parts of the episode. I've kind of been hinting at it, but I just like I want to zero in on it more now that we have the other half of the story. I mentioned that someone left a note at the door. I mentioned the doctor showed up to Rory and all these things, and now it's coming full circle as to how all of that stuff happened. And so the doctor uses the vortex manipulator to set everything right. He travels back in time to tell Rory to get him out of the Pandorica and gives him his sonic screwdriver. He also tells Rory to leave his sonic screwdriver in Amy's top pocket. He also uses the vortex manipulator to go and deliver the brochure to Amelia so that she knows to come to the museum. He is also the one who ended up snatching her drink earlier in the day and gives this drink to Amelia, and also goes back in time again to leave the note on the Pandorica telling her to stick around the museum. I love when movies and TV shows do that. It's kind of like stuff happens and they don't explain it till later. It's one of the reasons I love the like Knives Out series that is starting to be formed. There's only 2 movies at this point, Knives Out and Glass Onion, but that's one of the things I love about those movies is like how everything just kind of comes full circle. But after doing all of this, they start to head upstairs and they are interrupted by the doctor appearing at the top of the stairs. And this doctor is beaten and battered, and he falls down the steps and lands right in front of what I will call the present doctor. So for this little scene, I will say the beaten doctor and the present doctor. The present doctor is the one with the fez, and the beaten doctor is the one who fell down the stairs. The present doctor goes to check on the beaten doctor because again, he don't look good and he just fell down the steps. And the beaten doctor opens his eye, grabs the present doctor, and whispers something in his ear before passing out. Amy asks if the beaten doctor is dead, and the present doctor tells her yes, and that he has 7 minutes. And Amy is like, 7 minutes to live? And the doctor is like, yes, but he is not necessarily concerned with that. Every time she's asking these questions, he's kind of like, let's get a move on it. And I mean, Amy and Rory are, still taken back by the fact that in 12 minutes the doctor is going to die, and that a dead version of the doctor is laying right in front of him. And the present doctor is like, that doesn't matter right now because the universe is still collapsing. It hasn't ended. And the thing he uses to point this out to them is the disappearance of Amelia, the younger version of Amy. They look around and she's no longer there. And the doctor is like, it's because she never existed. Again, the universe is still collapsing. So we need to go. And he also highlights again the only reason that the three of them are still around is because they are in the eye of the storm, but that eye is getting smaller and it is closing. And so they all run up to the roof. And right before we get a cut to the roof, we see the Dalek standing in front of the light of the Pandorica restoring itself. On the roof, it is now morning, and the reason the doctor says this is because the universe is collapsing, things are getting shorter. And he tells them the reason that he led them up there is because he's looking for his TARDIS. It is the thing that caused this event, so he needs to find it. And I mean, it doesn't take him long because he points out that if the universe is collapsing and every star that ever exists ceased to exist, what is that thing in the air? Because to Amy and Rory, it simply looks like the sun. But again, the sun is a star. So the doctor explains to them that that is not the sun that has been keeping the earth warm. That is the TARDIS exploding. And to even prove this further to him, he grabs what I would call a dish. It's like the thing you put on top of houses when you want to like have a TV. I don't know if they do those anymore, but he grabs one of those. He uses his sonic screwdriver to amplify the sound that the sun is making. And when we hear the sound the sun is making, it is making the whooshing sound that the TARDIS normally makes. And then Rory points out that he also hears something else. And so the doctor amplifies the sound even more, and on repeat, we hear someone saying, "I'm sorry, my love." And immediately the doctor recognizes this voice as being River's voice. And he puts together that the emergency protocol of the TARDIS saved her. In the emergency protocol of the TARDIS, what the TARDIS does is it seals the control room in a time loop. So in an effort to save River's life, it put the last few seconds of her life in a loop. And then we get this cut to seeing it, and it is the last scene that I summarized at the end of the last episode of River trying to get control of the TARDIS, hot wiring the doors, and then when she opens the door and she meets a wall again, she says, "I'm sorry, my love," and the TARDIS explodes. And in the episode, we actually get to see this loop a few times, and on the last time we see the loop, as she is running through the doors, the doctor is there, and he uses the vortex manipulator to teleport them out of the exploding TARDIS and back onto the roof where Amy and Rory are. Then we get this funny scene where Amy and River team up and they steal the doctor's fez and shoot it off of his head. I just love this scene because I actually have over there, I'll take a picture of it. The doctor with the fez and the mop is one of my favorite pop figures. Now thinking about it, I don't know why it was so hard for me to make this decision because I literally have the pop figure of the doctor with the fez, and then I have a pop figure of Rory the Roman. I guess younger me knew, because I haven't collected pop figures in years. Younger me knew what my all-time favorite episode was before I did. Funny how that works. Anyways, their little reunion gets cut short because the Dalek decides to fly up to the roof and start shooting at them again, and so they run back inside. And the doctor points out that he has about 4 minutes left. And again, the doctor also tries to put together why the Dalek exists. Yes, he knows that it is from the light of the Pandorica, but why did the light of the Pandorica restore the Dalek? And again, I'm going to quote what he says and how he explains this because it's just better that way. The doctor says, and I quote, "When the TARDIS blew up, it caused a total event collapse, a time explosion. And that explosion blasted every atom in every moment of the universe, except inside the Pandorica. And inside the Pandorica is a perfectly preserved few billion atoms of the universe as it was." So if that didn't make sense, the doctor also says, and I quote, "The box contains a memory of the universe, and the light from the Pandorica transmits that memory." And this gives the doctor the idea to do the Big Bang too. And he basically summarizes what that is later, so I won't tell you what it is now, but this is when he gets the idea to do it. As they're walking back to the Pandorica, River is trying to reason with the doctor because she disagrees with his theory, but their disagreement is cut short when the Dalek that was upstairs shoots the doctor. Funny enough, the 10th Doctor episode that I ended up summarizing as my favorite, the 10th Doctor ends up getting shot by a Dalek too. And that's how the end of that first episode goes. If I had a penny for every time a Dalek shot the doctor. At this point, with these 2 episodes, I'd have 2 pennies, which is not a lot, but it's funny that it's 2. As the doctor is recovering from being shot by the Dalek, he uses the vortex manipulator to transport downstairs 12 minutes ago to when he was at the top of the stairs and he came face to face with himself, Amy, Rory, and Amelia. Amy tells this to River and she tells him that, well, yeah, 12 minutes ago he did this and he died in front of us. And River sends Amy and Rory ahead and she stays back to have this cool scene, and she ends up killing the Dalek and then meeting them back downstairs. But before she even gets there, when Amy and Rory get to the stairs, the doctor isn't there on the stairs. And Amy and Rory are confused by this, but River points out that rule 1 is the doctor lies. And so they all run back to the room where the Pandorica is and they find him inside the Pandorica. Upon looking at the doctor inside the Pandorica, because at this point he still is weak and he's like passed out when they find him, you can see that he has been working on the Pandorica. And Amy puts together that the reason that he lied was so that they could be a distraction to the Dalek, so that he could be downstairs working on the Pandorica. And at this point, River finally understands what the doctor meant by Big Bang 2. And again, I will quote to you how she explains what Big Bang 2 is to Rory and Amy. The TARDIS is still burning. It is exploding at every point in history. If you threw the Pandorica into the explosion, right into the heart of the fire, the light from the Pandorica would explode everywhere at once. Basically, it would create a restoration field powered by an exploding TARDIS happening at every moment in history. Then River goes to Amy to go and tell her that the doctor wants to see her to say goodbye to her. Amy is confused by this, and River basically tells her, to execute this plan, he has to fly the Pandorica into the heart of the TARDIS, into the exploding TARDIS. And by doing this, it would seal all the cracks in the universe, but it would also put him on the wrong side of all these cracks. And he would be trapped in the never space, which is the void that exists between worlds. And by being there, all memory of him would be erased from the universe, and he basically would never have been born. So Amy, of course, goes to say her goodbyes to the doctor, and the doctor brings up again the reason as to why he decided to take her to travel with him. Again, like he said in the last episode, her house was too big. There were too many empty rooms, and her life did not make sense. And he asks Amy what happened to her parents, and Amy doesn't even remember what happened to her parents. And to me, what I took from this little exchange, this is not confirmed in any way, shape, or form, but what I hypothesize is that, remember, Rory was taken by one of the cracks in the universe, and so it made it so that he was never born and Amy couldn't remember him. I believe the same thing basically happened to her parents. But the doctor points out that this is one of the reasons that he wants to fly the Pandorica into the exploding TARDIS, because when the universe is restored, he wants her to have a mom and a dad. And she points out, how is she able to have a mom and dad that never existed? If they were taken, how can she just create them out of nowhere? And he says that she has the ability to do this because of how she grew up with the cracks in time in her bedroom. So he tells her to remember her mom and dad, and they will be there. And then he closes the doors and goes to fly the Pandorica into the exploding TARDIS. He does use the device he has to send one last message to the group, and River receives it and she reads it out loud, and it basically says Geronimo. And as the collision between the Pandorica and the exploding TARDIS happen, the doctor gets transported back into the TARDIS. At this point, he believes that he has escaped being trapped on the outside of the universe, but upon further inspection, like as he gets off the floor and walks around, he notices that he's actually been transported to a week before the events of what is happening to him now. And he sees him and Amy in the TARDIS going to Space Florida, and he realizes that he's being rewinded on his own time stream because his time stream is unraveling and being erased. Then next, he gets transported to 3 weeks before that event, where he sees Amy leaving this note on this house. He tries to call out to her at this point, and she kind of hears him, but then again doesn't completely hear him. And then he gets transported further back in time to when they were climbing out of the Byzantium trying to escape the Weeping Angels. And at this point, he is actually able to make contact with Amy, and so he goes up to her and he tells her to remember what he told her when she was 7. And then lastly, he gets transported back to 1996 when Amy was 7 on the night that she waited for him. And he goes out to the yard and he sees Amelia laying on her suitcase, and he takes her inside, tucks her into bed, sits in a chair next to her, and starts to tell her a story. He tells her a story about the TARDIS and about him being a madman with the box, and kind of reminisces on everything they've done and everything that at this point now will never happen. Then he kisses her goodnight and he leaves through the crack, because one thing he says is that the cracks in the universe can't completely seal until he's on the other side. So instead of seeing the rest of his life unravel, he goes back through the crack. Then we shift to older Amy on the morning of June 26, 2010, and it is the morning of her wedding day. She is like in bed, just stretching and just waking up when her mother walks in the room to bring her breakfast. And Amy is completely surprised by this. And her mother is like, "Why are you surprised that I'm your mother?" And Amy's like, "I don't know." And then she also has the same exact reaction to when she sees her dad downstairs. And of course, we know it's because in the other version of reality, she didn't have a mom and dad. So now that she does have a mom and dad, part of her brain remembers that version of reality. And so it's getting used to that. But then we get transported to the reception of her wedding. She, Rory, her parents are, and everyone else in her, I think it's called a bridal party. I don't know. I've been to one wedding and I was like 6. But they are all sitting up at the front of the room, and Amy's all happy, but then she like catches a glimpse of River outside, and that causes her to pause. And then she starts crying and she doesn't understand why she is crying. And Rory also ends up giving her this gift that some woman left her as a wedding present, and it ends up being River Song's diary. And upon seeing River's diary, this kind of prompts Amy to look around the room, and we kind of get cuts to certain things that hint at the doctor. You know, she looks at one wedding guest and they're wearing a bow tie. She looks at another wedding guest and they're wearing suspenders. And this causes her to kind of stand up and start to make a speech to the room. And in this speech, she mentions her imaginary friend. And upon saying, "I had an imaginary friend as a child," her mom and her aunt have that frustrated reaction, because her aunt makes a comment like, "We sent her to like so many psychiatrists about this." But you know, again, Amy is saying, you know, "I had this imaginary friend. He was the Raggedy Doctor." And the last thing she says in the speech is like, "Raggedy Doctor, you're late for my wedding." And then out of nowhere, the room starts to shake. And then I would say she gives this other amazing monologue like the actor Karen Gillan does. And she's basically summarizing, she understands as to why he told her that story in her bedroom when she was 7, because in some way, shape, or form, he knew that she would be able to bring him back. And of course, the room was shaking because the doctor and the TARDIS was appealing. And so, yeah, now the doctor exists in the universe again. Roy remembers him, Amy remembers him, the world remembers him. As in to what extent, I do not know. But after this, we get this wedding scene where the doctor's dancing. It's a really funny scene. But after that scene, we get a scene to the doctor walking back to his TARDIS. He's about to open it when he gets interrupted by River. And the doctor gives River back her diary, and he also gives her the vortex manipulator. She uses the vortex manipulator and leaves. And then the doctor enters the TARDIS, but not shortly after, Amy and Rory enter the TARDIS as well. And our episode finally ends with Amy and Rory saying goodbye to Legworth and leaving in the TARDIS with the doctor to go help contain an Egyptian goddess that is loose on the Oriental Express. Which I think is funny because there's an episode in the 12th Doctor season where they deal with a mummy, I believe, on a version of the Oriental Express, but I digress. Those 2 episodes of Doctor Who are a perfect example as to what I love about Doctor Who and what I love about the 11th Doctor. One thing that's always been my draw to the 11th Doctor is not his goofiness. I feel like that's like a weird word to use. It's like his like wittiness and his like quick pace like thinking and talking. I'm not saying that the 10th Doctor and the Ninth Doctor don't have that. I feel like the 12th Doctor also has that as well, and the 13th Doctor, but it's just something about it. I think from like a background standpoint, I believe this is when they got new main writer or someone who goes over writing for Doctor Who came into the Doctor Who universe, which is I believe why the fans say that the 11th Doctor is different from the 10th and the ninth. I don't completely keep up on the background stuff, but I think that is just one of my draws to the 11th Doctor. And of course, I have a theory that the first Doctor you end up watching is going to be your Doctor, because the Doctor as a character within himself is just like so fun and lovable. So like you get attached to the first version you see of the Doctor, and then you do grow to love the other Doctors, but at that point you've already seen this Doctor as the Doctor, so no other Doctor completely compares to that Doctor. But yeah, if you would like to tell me your favorite 11th Doctor episode down in the comment section, I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like it if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more of me. I post every other Wednesday. I do also have a second channel that I post on, and I post on that channel also every other week, but their schedules are flip-flopped. So if you want more videos from me, if you want to see me every week, feel free to subscribe to my second channel, because when I don't post on here, I post on my second channel, and when I don't post on my second channel, I post on here. So I post on my second channel every other Monday, and I post on here every other Wednesday. But I hope you have a good weekend, weekday, weeknight, and bye!